welcome back to Let's Play Metroid for the NES. We are now in Norfair, and in this part there will be bitching. Mostly because Norfair is the biggest offender of my problems with this game. So let's just get into it straight away. The reason I don't really like this game is, well, for one thing, there are a lot of locations in the game, again mostly in Norfair, where in order to progress you need to break through a wall that in no way indicates that there is something behind that wall. You just think it's a dead end, or just something that's a floor, or just a wall and there's nothing behind it, or a way to break through it, but there is, and there's again nothing telling you that you can break through the thing. Of course this isn't too much of a big deal when all the things behind that wall are just optional, or just missile tanks and E-tanks that you don't need to get in order to progress with the game. But one thing, there can be a lot of things behind that sort of wall, so over like 80% of those things are technically things you might not find at all, because there's nothing telling you you need to go there. And making things even worse is that it's not always things that are optional behind those walls. Sometimes you need to go through walls that, I know I keep repeating this, but don't tell you in any way, shape or form that you can go behind those walls or through those walls. And sometimes you need to go there. Places that are mandatory in order to beat the game, but you have no idea those places even exist, even though you might have been right next to it or right on top of it, but you just thought it's a dead end because, well, it looks exactly like a dead end. In this sort of game it's very important that you know where you need to go, and there's another thing getting in the way of that. A lot of places in this game suffer from copy and pasting. They look exactly 100% like another location in the game, so you think you're there when you're actually somewhere else. So even if you remember a certain location, have memorized it and remembered it, know exactly where you need to go from there, the game could be deceiving you in you're not actually there at all, it just looks like you're there. So in the end what it just all boils down to is this game needs a map. It needed a map, in fact it had a map. It had a map in Nintendo Power Issues. It had a full map of the entire game. It would have been better if it actually came with the game itself, but okay, problem solved, right? Well, yes, so why am I complaining about it? Because it pisses me the fuck off when people try to defend it. The dumbest and absolute dumbest argument I've ever heard is, I played Metroid 1 without a map and I got through it just fine. Just because you did that doesn't mean this game doesn't need a map. Especially this sort of game, and especially one that is very unclear about where you are and where you need to go, definitely needs a map. And it's why it has a map, it's why they gave you a map. And what pisses me off even more about it is that I know exactly what you did in order to get through this game without a map. You bombed every single wall and floor in this game. You can't say, oh, I just sort of knew there was something behind that wall either, because there's literally nothing in the game telling you. So call it a hunch? Well, that's not game design. So I'm sorry, if I have to roll into morph ball mode, place bombs on every single pixel whenever I get to a wall or floor just because I know this game might put something behind it, that's not fun. So that argument of just because you've played the game without a map so you can essentially beat the game with a map, that's dumb, because it still needs a map. And again, it's why they gave you a map, and it's why every single Metroid game after Metroid 2 has had a map. And with that I mean a map within the game itself. And the only reason this game doesn't have it, it's because it's an NES game. It couldn't have had a map. So in the end, the only thing holding this game back is because it's ahead of its time. Video game technology simply wasn't far enough to give this game what it needed to get. To make this game what it needed to be. It needed a map. It needed to be able to make areas distinct enough and make breakable objects distinct enough. And you know what other NES game suffers from these exact same problems? The first Legend of Zelda game. Really, the exact same problems. In that game, it was also unclear where you needed to go or where you are. It suffered from copy and pasting and such and such. It had a lot of things like, how was I supposed to know that? How was I supposed to know I was able to break that wall in order to progress or get this item? It's the exact same, and that game also came with a map, so they knew, and they make sequels that did all of those things right, so in the end there is no reason to go back to this game, but people still like to say these games were amazing, which they weren't. They might have been revolutionary, but they weren't revolutionary enough because they couldn't have been. What pisses me off even more is when people say they're great by today's standards. Oh please, stop living in a fantasy retro world of nostalgia. I'm gonna take a break from all the complaining for a moment to explain what I'm about to do right now. Suicide. I know I won't be able to make it back to where I came from without dying, so I might as well take it gracefully. Besides, I need to go back really far anyway, so going back to the entrance of Norfair and then go back to where we're from here doesn't make much of a difference in terms of time and distance. And it gives me a chance to show off this game's password system, because it doesn't have a save feature, so whenever you die it gives you a password that saves your progress from where you were, how many missiles you had, how many energy tanks you had, and which items you have, and pretty much almost everything except health, because you always spawn with 30 health anyway, so I hate that so much. So now you will notice I'm taking the time to kill every enemy I find just so I can regain health. So that's not a problem in this game, I already mentioned in part 1, but now I get a chance to show it off in another one of my almost no death runs, because that is the only time I die in this game. But going back to the password system, there are things other than saving your progress that you can do with the password system. There are, for example, cheat codes that give you every single item in this game without you having to look for them. Also cheat codes that allow you to play as Samus without her power suit, someone who will later be known as Zero Suit Samus, someone who has yesterday been confirmed for the new Smash Brothers for the Wii U, so now you know when this audio was recorded. Though it will probably be another few months or weeks or whatever before I actually upload this video, so that will be old news by then. What was I saying? Ah yes, Samus without a power suit. You actually unlock the ability to play as Samus without a power suit normally by already playing the game once, though I think you actually need to get the good ending in order to get that. Because yes, there are multiple endings in this game, something I'll explain a bit more about later. But I will make extra videos. I'll make one extra video showing off the multiple endings, one showing off the different cheat codes. I'm not gonna show off every single cheat code that is in this game, because there are a lot of those. But I'm gonna show off a few interesting ones, the more well-known ones, and just ones that I find fun and easy to input. Like, I think there's one of them just goes X X X X X X Y Y Y Y Y Y Y, or something like that. Though to explain something about the multiple endings, those are dependent on how fast you beat the game. Actually, the best ending I will not get for this playthrough, because the very best ending you are unable to get unless you are using cheat codes. So I will go for the second best thing, which you actually can get on a normal playthrough. So I'm technically going for the best ending you could get unless you're using cheat codes, but it's technically known as the good ending instead of the bad ending. Sorry if I'm being a bit vague right now, but I have a tendency to forget breathing when I'm doing long recording sessions like these, so we're actually getting a new item. An item that I don't think is necessary to beat the game, though I'm not sure you might need this to beat the game, but I'm just gonna call this a semi-required pickup, just like the long beam, because there are places it would be really useful and you're kind of helpless without this item. These are the high jump boots, and they allow us to jump high. It is definitely needed to get some of the items in this game. Not sure if you needed to actually beat the game with like a low percentage, but I'm never going to try, so I'm just gonna assume I always need it. Also, now that we have this item, we can go back to Brinstar and get another item that, as I explained before, would be really useful in both Norfair and Ridley's Lair. But we're not going to do that, just because I would have to go back to Brinstar and then go back to Norfair. And I don't want to do that, because for one, I am going for the good ending, so I need to think about time and how fast I do things. And it's really also why I planned things out. So I had the map and I drew arrows on it, and I still ignored some of those arrows like a doofus, so I had to go back later, and I still feel like an idiot for that. Now you might be wondering, weren't we in this room before? No, that was just a room that looked exactly like this one. Once again, copy and pasting, it's kind of a problem here. Also, you saw in order to get to this room, we had to go through the wall inside an item room. The item room, the one place you might think you're safe, you don't have to worry about anything. No, they put a dick move like that in it. And Once again, all of this is optional, but it's like 10 or so missile tanks and I think an E-tank. So that's something that you might really want, because it's kind of a good idea to go after missile tanks and E-tanks. I think I'm gonna have to do a little edit right here, because I'm at low health, I don't want to die, so I'm gonna grind for a health a little bit with this respawning enemy, so editing time. So while this is happening, I'll just change the subject. Samus has two different kind of jumps in this game. One of them is the straight jump. It just happens when you're standing still and then press the jump button, though you can still move left and right after you've already jumped. The other one is the spin jump, which activates if you're jumping while already in motion, so while already moving left and right and then pressing the jump button. I think it has the same horizontal distance, the same vertical distance, so it might be a little more, but barely noticeable. The thing is, the spin jump is a lot less controllable. You can still move left and right in midair with a spin jump, but you can't really stop. So the straight jump is a lot more reliable in terms of making precise jumps, just because you can land it a lot easier. So now you might be thinking, well, if the straight jump is so much easier for precision platforming, why would you ever use the spin jump to begin with? Well, that's what this item is for. In this room we can find the screw attack, which is probably the best item in this game, especially in terms of defending yourself. The screw attack pretty much allows you to do touching damage to enemies simply by using the spin jump, and it does do a very high amount of damage. In fact, I think that every enemy you can hit with it pretty much dies in one hit, so very useful. Sadly doesn't work on bosses, but it's still a very easy way to attack enemies without having to rely on shooting on them, aiming at them and being able to miss. You can just jump into them like you're a Sonic. So I'm very glad I have this now, because I don't have to worry about stopping in a room in order to kill enemies before they can hit me. I can just hit them by jumping into them and I won't have to stop, and it's great. Also, on a very unrelated note, I love the item room music. Mostly because back in high school I had this friend, and whenever it was quiet in class, one of us would just start whistling the item room music theme, song, whatever, and the other one would just crack up, and I don't know why we think that's so goddamn funny, but just the memories. Anyway, back to things you might actually care about. Let's see. There are two kinds of health power-ups in this game. They look exactly alike, but some of them give you 5 health and other ones give you 20 health. You don't know which it's gonna be before you pick it up, but you can notice by looking at your health. But that's nice. At least when you get to 20, it's nice. When you need a 20 and you get a 5, it almost sounds like I'm talking about money here. But that can be a bit disappointing. That was a 5. And that enemy just hit me for 10 and threw me into the lava. The lava can also be a bitch in this game, mostly because, well, first of all, there's a lot of it. Second of all, other than it just hurting you, it also gimps your jump, so it might be pretty hard to get out of it. To make things even worse, at least for my experience, the sprite flicker might cause you to not be able to see Samus. So I don't know where I'm jumping, I don't know where I'm landing, so I might just land back into the lava and I might be there for a while. In fact, you are probably gonna see that happen a few times in this playthrough, especially near the very end. Also, this is lava. This red stuff is very definitely lava. The yellow stuff, I think it's either sand or acid. It could be either one, but it's not lava. And why is that important? Because that item that is back at Brinstar at the moment, that would be very useful here and in Ridley's Lair, makes you completely immune to lava. However, it doesn't protect you from the other stuff. Sand, acid, I don't know. It looks exactly like this lava sprite, except it has a slightly different color. And then in Torian there's also stuff that looks exactly like lava, at least it's red like lava, but this lava has blue frickles for whatever fucking reason, and in Torian it has white frickles for whatever fucking reason. And for some reason you can get hit by the Torian lava, but not by this lava. I don't know. It's utterly random and I don't feel like making up an excuse for it right now. Anyway, keep in mind folks that everything we're going through right now is all optional in terms of Norfair. You pretty much just need to go through the purple area of Norfair, go down and you're already in Ridley's Lair. So this is just, I think we're about to get to another E-tank and then we're gonna have to backtrack really far. But I could really use that E-tank right now because I'm very close to dying. Also, look, a room that looks exactly like another room that was already somewhere else, but is also here, even though it's a different room, but looks exactly like it, and I'm doing the exact same here as in the other room, and that is grinding health from enemies. Which is a lot easier now that I have the screw attack, and I didn't do it for very long, so at least I didn't have to speed that one up. But as I said before, with all the copy and paste rooms in this game, and I know I'm repeating myself here, I already said all of this, but I'm just gonna say it again, just so you remember, I'm gonna beat it into your brain. This game is meant to be played with a map. So do yourself a favor and play this game with a map, and remember that the only reason it doesn't have a map in-game is because it's an NES game, it couldn't. Oh, and also remember that if anyone tells you otherwise, they had the pleasure of having to bomb every single wall and floor in this game just to get anywhere. And oh my god, was I close to dying just now. If I fucked up even one more time because I was using the spin jump instead of the straight jump, again, I recommend using the straight jump, then I would have died, be sent back all the way to the beginning of Norfair, and these last 15 minutes would have been for nothing. And that is with knowing where you're going. Also, I could make the same argument I made in my Castlevania Let's Play, where you might not have the movement or abilities to defend yourself quite as much as you need to, but in this game you have missiles, you have the ice beam, especially energy tanks, and above all the screw attack. So there's only one thing really keeping you back, and that's the fact that you can only shoot left, right and up. You can't shoot down, you can't shoot diagonally, so that can be a real downer when it comes to hitting certain enemies that are just not in the right position for you, or you can't really get to them very easily. But that's pretty much it. Also, what I can make the same argument is that there is a really big penalty for dying. But you've already heard me say that multiple times, so no need to repeat that once more. Though there are other things that you might call unfair. Well, there's one thing that when you're going through a door, you can't really do anything, but enemies can still spawn in and hit you. So while you're going through a door where you're helpless and can't defend yourself in any way, shape or form, enemies can still hit you, and that can be a giant pain in the ass, even though they just hit you once, so it's not too big of a deal, but when that happens a lot, you are taking a lot of damage. And the knockback, of course. On its own, it's not that big of a deal, but you do freeze up for a moment, which allows other enemies to hit you and cause even more knockback and such and such. And also that there's just so much lava and stuff in the game where you can fall into after taking knockback. And then when you try to jump out of the lava, another enemy can hit you, so you fall back into the lava. So a problem is that enemies can combo you very easily, especially since they come in large numbers. So I recommend trying to kill everything before it even gets a chance to touch you. So the only problem that stays is the respawning enemies. You can't really do anything about those unless you freeze them. I think if you freeze an enemy, they won't spawn a new one, but I'm not 100% sure. Oh, and fake lava. This is fair. This is something you won't ever need a map for, he said sarcastically. No, we don't have that item in Brinstar yet, and we aren't immune to lava yet. Except that one, which is, I guess it's fake lava, which there's nothing telling you. You're just supposed to figure that out somehow, and it's bullshit, because why would you even go into the lava? Because you would think it damages you, and if you suddenly can go in it, why would you assume there would be breakable bricks under it? And granted, that sort of stuff is also in Super Metroid, which is the third Metroid game and also my personal favorite Metroid game. It does stuff like that as well, but there's one exception, that's the map. Even when the map doesn't tell you there's a room behind it, there is sort of a way it kind of does tell you there's a room behind it. In Super Metroid, if you're in a room and check the map, and there is absolutely no way you can progress that way, it will put a little white line at the very side of the block that is that room on the map. So if you're in a room where there is a hidden pathway, you can look at the map and notice it won't have the little white line there, and that way you will know, hey, there's more to this room than it looks like. And I find that genius! I love Super Metroid, it's so great. Super Metroid is everything that this game needed to be. Metroid 2, not really. Metroid 2 is kinda different, but you'll see that when it happens. It does improve on minor things, but that's mostly in the control department. But even though I have yet to play Metroid 2 doesn't have a map either, but Metroid 2 doesn't really need a map because it's very linear. You won't be confused on where you need to go, and the structure is just kind of different, and that's what a lot of people don't really like about Metroid 2 either. But Again, I've yet to play it, I am planning to do that very soon. But I am looking forward to that, it does seem like a fun enough game. I don't care if you think that one is better than Metroid Other M. I don't care if you think every other Metroid game is better than Other M. Just as long as you don't think this one is better, because it isn't. This game is bad, it has aged. If I happen to offend you by saying any of this, I don't care. Open your eyes, man. It's retro, nothing else. Though I do enjoy a good retro game myself from time to time. Sometimes even this one, but not very often. But that is only because it's retro. I don't think they're superior in any way, because they simply aren't. I'm into game design. I like my games to be good and well designed. But maybe that's also why I go back to retro games. That and the challenge, but mostly to see how you shouldn't do things. Not to say everything here is done wrong. Like the morph ball thing at the very beginning, how you had to use it in order to get out of that room without it telling you how to use it, but you just sort of had to learn how to use it. I still think that's genius, and Super Metroid will improve on that with even more things like that. And of course I don't blame them for getting things wrong either. I mean, game design was new at the time. Nobody knew how to do it well, because, well, you can't be good at something if you haven't had enough practice with it and just started out. I just want you to keep in mind that throughout this playthrough I come off as pretty angry, but that's mostly directed to the people who do still say this game is amazing by today's standards. That's the only thing that really pisses me off. Of course there are small things in this game that piss me off, but like I just explained, I know why that's like that. So please keep that in mind while I continue to act very frustrated. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think the NES games that have aged fairly well in comparison to other games like this one are the really simplified games that didn't really do anything complicated like this one or the first Legend of Zelda. I'm thinking about this because the 8-bit Mega Man games are still some of my favorite games, period. But I know they're not perfect by any means, but I think the reason they haven't aged as bad as others is because there's a lot less you can get wrong. I mean, how much can you get wrong about just jumping and shooting? Same goes for 8-bit Mario. You could still say that back then pretty much everything still needed improvement. Everything in a Mario game is still a lot less compared to everything in a Metroid game. Just because there's so much more design aspects and so much more things you can get wrong. So that's interesting. I wasn't really expecting to have this conversation with myself. I just started talking about retro games, then I started thinking, and then this sort of happened. So yeah. I think it might also have something to do with the amount of freedom. You don't get a whole lot of freedom in a platformer, but you do in like a Metroid or Zelda game. Maybe that's where the problem lies. That in NES games, freedom usually meant no direction at all, which is not how it should be. There should be direction, just not forcing you in that direction. And with that said, I think Zelda 2 is a lot better in that regard than Zelda 1 and Metroid 1. In Zelda 2, the overworld is very clear, it's very recognizable, it doesn't suffer from copy and pasting, and it never takes long to figure out where you need to go. Granted, they only give you so many options and you're a bit more limited, but that's because I don't think the NES was ready to not be limited, because they couldn't give you that many options in terms of like a map and such. The Zelda 2 overworld was designed in such a way that you don't even need a map for it, as opposed to this game or Zelda 1. I don't know why I'm talking about Zelda and a Metroid game so much, but there you go. Because it does relate, it's both a non-linear game structure, and I think that Zelda 2 is the better game for it, because it's slightly less non-linear, it's more linear. And I'm not trying to sound like I just prefer linearity over non-linearity. What I'm trying to say is that back in the NES days, there wasn't as much option to do non-linearity as Zelda 1 and Metroid 1 tried. So once again, I think Zelda 2 is better off for it. I'm not trying to make it sound like I think Zelda 2 is like the best Zelda game ever. No, it does have other problems and just other differences, but in that regard of the non-linearity I just talked about, there I think it's just better. Because it's just designed for it better. So yeah, I think I've pretty much explained everything about my complaints and opinion about both this game and just other games that weren't ready to do a structure like this. And it only took me 24 minutes. But hey, what can I say? We're going through Norfair, we're just collecting optional items, and it's something that needed a lot of explaining, I think. So I'm glad I took that time, and I'm glad I took it now before I have to talk about other stuff. Also, a little behind the scenes trivia for here at CrimsonAce Let's Plays, he said pretentiously. In the middle of recording the audio for this video, I actually took a little break for about a week, and within that week I fully played and beaten Zelda 1 about 3 times. The final time I recorded, so that might be a full playthrough somewhere in the future, but that might take a while. But anyway, as much as I already knew about Zelda 1 beforehand, I never actually played and beaten it before then, so... And I really wanted to make a lot of comparisons between this game and that game, and it really hasn't changed, but I felt like I should play it firsthand, because well, otherwise it wouldn't be very legit, but in the end it hasn't changed, so it would have been legit. And I'm glad I now got my whole opinion about this game and its general structure out of the way, because that's something I really wanted to do, but at the same time I was also worried about trying to explain it properly. And the fact that my speaking skills are about similar to that of Daffy Duck doesn't help a lot either. Also, I brought up earlier how I took like a week-long break in the middle of this part. What may have been like 10 minutes ago for you was like a week ago for me. And I do that more often, so by the time I actually get to uploading a video, it might already be months and months after. So, yeah. I'm sorry if you're really not here to hear about the process of my Let's Play making, but for the people who are interested, yeah. Also sorry for rambling a lot during this part, but we're going through Norfair and nothing is really happening. And I don't want to start a new topic since we're near the end of this video, and then I won't have enough time to finish that topic. But don't worry, next part there's gonna be trivia. Trivia is always fun, right? I guess. I don't know. Why am I grinding again? No. This one doesn't take very long, so I'm not gonna speed it up. There are only 2 places in the game where I'll speed up what I recorded, so one of them is the one you already saw where I grind for a while. The other one is in Crate's Lair, and that one I'm pretty ashamed of. You'll see it when it happens, and you're allowed to laugh at me, because I would laugh at me too if I wasn't crying in the corner. Why am I foreshadowing my own goddamn playthrough? Next time on Let's Play Metroid, there's gonna be trivia, but it's gonna be interrupted by editing. After that, there will be failure, so tune in next time! Yeah, I'm really just trying to fill up time at this point. I could also just stop talking, but that wouldn't be a very interesting Let's Play. Then again, this also isn't a very interesting Let's Play, since I'm just talking about bullshit to fill up those last 3 minutes, because I don't want to start a new topic on my list of topics and wait for those to be more appropriate or well-timed, or I also just don't want to run out of topics before I get to the end. But also the last few minutes have just been backtracking. We gathered all the items that we needed to find, and now we needed to go all the way back to almost the beginning of Norfair to go to Ridley's lair, because as I said before, this was all optional. Norfair, if you ignore all the items, is very straightforward. But I am getting all the items. This is a 100% run, because my skills alone just aren't enough to impress anyone, so at the very least what I can do is be helpful and be informative and such and such. Time to be slimy. And if you want to see more 100% runs, you can check out my channel for Donkey Kong Country and my currently non-existent Zelda Let's Play, and you can subscribe while you're at it, and comment and like and favorite and post it on your Facebook and Twitter and shout it on the streets and buy my t-shirts! I don't have any t-shirts. I don't even have anything to put on the t-shirts. I really should get back on topic, but everything I can talk about right now is stuff I've already said before. The game doesn't tell you where you need to go, it needs a map, it doesn't tell you which walls you can bomb, all those things. This game was meant to be played with a map, but it couldn't, and I can forgive that, but at the same time I get frustrated by people who think that games should be like this, and I'm just summarizing everything I just talked about in like the last 30 minutes. And again, I'm also just really hoping I explained things as well as I could, because even if you don't agree, I at least want you to understand my viewpoint. I also want to hear counter arguments of people who disagree but say more than just fuck you, this game is amazing, without actually explaining actual counter arguments or explain their viewpoint. But maybe I'm just asking for too much intelligence of the internet right now. But anyway, we're finally near the end of this video and about to enter Ridley's lair, which is gonna be a lot shorter than this video, and I'll actually try to stay on topic because I actually have things to talk about then. You could have skipped this entire video. So join me next time in part 3 of Let's Play Metroid, where we take down Ridley.